So once again, we have a case of me looking around my collection for something I haven't reviewed yet, seeing something interesting going, I'd like to talk about that toy, and then realizing, oh hey, I have a really weird repaint of it, we'll do that instead. Which leads me to Universe Overkill from the Special Edition line. You know, that really short, really weird line where they took these classics toys and gave them these like super good paint jobs and made some new characters out of some and only sold them these like stylish black boxes and then had to clearance them out at Marshall's for some reason. You know, it was a weird thing, but it was a thing. And Overkill here was part of that. As you can see, it is the classics Grimlock mold with the more modernized horizontal T-Rex going on. That's all well and good. This is technically his default form, since in G1, Overkill was a cassette and turned into a little T-Rex. Though, actually, he's closer to a ceratosaur because he's supposed to have a horn on his nose, but I'm pretty sure a designer just said, let's make a cassette into a T-Rex, and hey, wouldn't it be cool if he had a horn? But technically, this is the identity of Overkill. I almost did this review backwards, starting with a robot mode, because I figured that's alternate mode for him. But no, instead we have something continuing the line of Soundwave minions that grew up and got their own robot mode. Aw, they grow up so fast these days. So, nevertheless, yes, it is a big metal T-Rex, and I like the coloring here. This pale blue and off-white. It's definitely not your standard Decepticon colors, but there's something very cold and mechanical about it that actually does seem to fit a more evil T-Rex. Quite like it. Now, a lot of the blue here is molding, but you'll also find some that is painted, especially if we look down the spine, where you can see it goes all the way up to the middle, all the way up to the head, to the tip of the tail, and some of it is molding, some of it is not. And I will be honest, I can't tell the difference. So Hasbro, good on ya. This is really good paint matching. It's hard to tell the difference between the paint and the plastic. So that was good. I like that. Easier to tell what's painted is the silver, which is done up here on the claws, both the 3 in front and 1 in rear, as well as some here at the top of the hip, just to give it a little bit more mechanical feel, because silver is always a nice color to throw onto your transforming robots. The only other color you'll find besides that is a little bit of yellow for the translucent effects, which there's actually kind of a light piping thing going on in beast mode, which is something of a rarity. So that looks quite nice, and the yellow's a good coloring. He doesn't look dead, which is my big gripe when it comes to light piping, so that's good. So he actually looks like, he looks like Overkill, and actually looks quite good in this form. Now, if you look at the actual molding across, you'll see tons and tons of little lines molded everywhere. There isn't any real rhyme or reason for much of it, aside from like the big hose going through here, a little bit of musculature-shaped paneling. For the most part, it's just a lot of tech detail to make him look like a really complicated, just really like intricately built mechanical T-Rex, and there's nothing wrong with that. I quite enjoy how this toy looks top to bottom. He looks relatively, looks like a robot T-Rex. What's there to complain about? Now, function-wise, there are a few things we can do here. I will tell you that while he is hinged to be a more traditional style of T-Rex, or a more modern style of T-Rex, rather, which stands horizontal, you can get a more vertical stance out of him. There is range thanks to the height of his tail, and the head does pivot down. So you can have something a little bit more close to the classic depiction, though nothing that's like the full vertical G1 style T-Rex that we had back in the 80s. So you have that. You also have a little bit of play in the tail for articulation. Everything there hinged all the way through, so he can kind of wag his tail and kind of get into, a little bit more natural position if you wanted to. For articulation, besides that, he does have hips that move forward as well as outward, and he also has a thigh rotation as well as a decent knee, goes all the way around, and some rocking ankles. You have this too, but that's part of transformation. You really don't want to move it. Ball joints here on the dinosaur arms. And I already showed you that the head tilts up and down to various degrees, but that also lets his jaw open. So he looks much more proper, angry T-Rex. That all works out for me. So good articulation in the beast mode. That is nice. Now you might be wondering, yes, it's a nice looking robotic T-Rex. What's with the big block sticking out of his back? Well, this is classics where everything was done up as traditionally as they could, and G1 was very big about putting vehicles with big missile launchers on their back, on their roofs and hoods, and the classics line did that too. And even though the G1 Grimlock couldn't do it, they made this mold do it. So that's his missile launcher fully attached to his back, and it looks kind of ridiculous, but at least you can mount it. At least it has a place to go. I just wish it wasn't so jutting out up there. I think this could have been shaved down a little bit, be less intrusive, and it would have looked fine. But I know it's a little bit distracting. So let's get him into robot mode, and I'll show you more of the missile launcher there. And this is where we kind of get some divisive opinions on the mold itself, because one, the tail completely comes off and part forms. We'll fold this under and then set it aside for later. A lot of people didn't like that part, and they really didn't like the fact that he doesn't transform the way G1 Grimlock transforms. He kind of breaks the norms, since he doesn't have these big wings made up of the T-Rex's robot mode. The upper half of the T-Rex actually ends up making his legs, which a lot of people were like, well, that's not traditional. That's not how Grimlock transformed. You're ruining my childhood, Hasbro, and all that. I like how this toy transforms, though, because it's got this really neat asymmetrical thing where it kind of wheels around and then forms the arms like this. It's a little bit more involved. I actually like that they took a different approach to how they actually get the character of Grimlock to transform. Even though this is Overkill, maybe because this is Overkill, this would be a little bit more forgiving. It might be a little bit easier for some who had that criticism to accept this as, I know, a little bit more of a proper character and toy now. Though it does have, even if you are in that group, if you are among the type who just don't like the toy because it does not work like the classic Grimlock does, there's I've got reasons for you, reasons I like. So that's what Overkill is going to look like in robot mode, in his first ever robot mode. Congratulations on the promotion. Of course, he is he's an off-white and pale blue Grimlock. There's really no way to hide it. Grimlock's just one of those characters that's really hard to repaint without making it look exactly like Grimlock. This could have been like Arctic Attack Grimlock, and I think you would have been just as convincing at the job. So we'll take a close look at the head, which is all Grimlock, but I will commend them. They did try. Instead of the single color, you do have some extra coloring there on the crest of the head as well as the face mask. So he actually does have some difference to his appearance aside from just coloration. It's a nice attempt. I think maybe a little bit more could have been done, but I don't know. It's what it is. It's probably as good as they could have managed, because he looks straight up Grimlock. Detail-wise, pretty much everything is visible from beast mode, but here we do get a good look at the color balancing a little bit better. We can see the silver is now up here at the shoulders. I like high shoulder points on these kinds of toys too. You can see a little bit more of the intermix between the blue and the white, which all works out. The chest is probably the biggest detail that's now visible to us, which aside from continuing all the heavy mold lines, you also have this translucent circle, which is where Grimlock had absolutely nothing. It was just kind of like this, weird nipple light thing. Now we have the Decepticon symbol molded there, or painted on actually, because originally these toys had rub signs. You can still see the square that's molded into this chunk of his leg. Not present here, so we have a more traditional Decepticon symbol. Overall, I like how the toy looks, because it's not typical of the character like Grimlock or Overkill. It's a little bit more understanding when you realize this is actually closer to how Pretender Grimlock worked, with the upper half of the T-Rex becoming the legs, for instance. And we can also exemplify that with the tail weapon, which now plugs in and actually has something of an angle to it. So it's always pointed up a little bit. I always consider it something of a lance weapon, even though in... Let's see, what did I do with it? Okay, I had an example. Okay, there it is. Even though in the original G1 Pretender Grimlock, it was a gun. But you can kind of see where some of the inspiration comes from. The high shoulder points are here. You can see where, you know, the beast mode's arms are located on the lower legs. So, I don't know. It seems to fit more of a match to that toy than it does G1 Grimlock. And realizing that, I can kind of accept him a little bit more, even though he does not have those traditional Grimlock values to him. He does have some loose hips, though, as you've probably noticed by now. So, yeah, let's just get to Articulation and show it off. He does have a rotating head. The arms are made of the beast mode legs, of course, so pretty much everything that was there is now available as well. So you've got all of that translating into good arm articulation. You have something of a waist joint. The torso does still rotate, though it's not centered, so some of the poses can look a little bit weird if you use that. Ball joints in the hips, which have really nice range to them. You also have, it's supposed to be a thigh swivel, but there's actually so much play in the ball joint, it doesn't really move all that much. Really good knee bend going on, and I think I just popped the ball joint. Yeah, they are really loose on this release. And the ankles still tilt because it is the T-Rex head. So Overkill gets a good range of articulation. Now, of course, this mold being used quite a bit. The ball joints are loose on mine. A little bit of degradation going on. That might just be mine. Mileage may vary. Ball joints especially are just one of those things that can vary from figure to figure. It might not be a universal thing. I don't know. I have not played with anyone else's Overkill. However, we can finish off with the last accessory, which being that missile launcher. Which, there's a few things about this that kind of bug me, admittedly. Now, for starters, yeah, it's a missile launcher with a blade attached, which counts as like the biggest bayonet I've ever seen. For what it is, it's perfectly fine. You know, you have G1, like the idea is to kind of combine like a G1 missile launcher with Grimlock's original sword. Here I think it works a little bit better, since again we don't have to worry about like Grimlock's like iconic looks and iconic features, since it's not technically not Grimlock. But you'll notice a firing missile, which of course we will not be firing off on camera, because anytime you're firing off a missile and you don't know where it's going to go, it actually resets time 5 seconds and vanishes in that little go. It actually resets time 5 seconds and vanishes in that little gap between. Anyone feel that? No, it's just me. But yeah, we're not going to be firing it off, but I will eject it just to show you. Man, they really missed a trick with this launcher. That's it. Like, that's all they needed. They needed just, like, put a peg on the top so I can have him with a sword weapon. I don't know why, because now he's got this forward-facing sword that is just not Grimlock. Yeah, well. I guess with how much going... Stop that! He keeps wanting to do the splits. Like, maybe Overkill is meant to be a dancer. I don't know. So that is Universe Overkill. I'm really a fan of this mold. I wish the hips were a little bit better on mine. So I don't know. Maybe a little bit of floor polish needs to touch those up. But I think it's a fine figure. Like, it's nice and solid. I think the transformation's quite unique. I think it works out really well. Yeah. As Grimlock, there's a lot to dislike about the toy if you're like really hung up on, well, it's a classics toy, it needs to transform like G1 Grimlock did. It does transform like G1 Grimlock, like the Pretender Grimlock. But still, as Overkill, a lot of that doesn't apply, so I think for a lot of reasons, this one is probably a much better figure for those who are just like a stickler for G1 accuracy, as accurate as an Overkill the robot mode is. But I think I think the figure itself is worth tracking down. If you can still find it for a decent price, no matter what the release is. Hello. Oh! So I was just gonna push him down until he did that. He did it all on his own. Like an automorph crotch splitting gimmick, which I don't think is gonna sell very well.